paint and cold coffee when the words finally landed, heavy and unforgiving, as if they had been waiting all morning just to break him. His knees weakened before his mind could catch up, and for a brief second, he wondered how a man was supposed to breathe when his entire life had been quietly dismantled in a corporate corridor. Ethan Brooks had stood outside that office door for nearly an hour, listening to the muffled sounds of meetings, laughter and keyboards tapping like nothing in the world was wrong. He kept checking his phone, not for messages from work, but for updates from the elementary school nurse. His 7-year-old son, Noah, had gone in with a fever again. Ethan had promised him that morning, hand pressed to a small, burning forehead, that everything would be okay. What if this happened to you? What if the one promise you lived by was the only thing you couldn't control? Inside the office, the walls were decorated with framed awards and inspirational quotes about leadership and loyalty. The boss, Richard Coleman, didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He spoke softly, almost kindly, explaining restructuring, budget cuts, and unfortunate timing. Ethan barely heard the words. All he could see was Noah sitting alone in the nurse's office, clutching his backpack, waiting for a father who now had nowhere to go back to. Ethan was a single dad not by choice, but by survival. His wife, Megan, had died 3 years earlier after a sudden illness that gave them no time to prepare, no time to say goodbye properly. One day she was there humming while folding laundry, and the next she was gone, leaving behind silence, medical bills, and a child who cried himself to sleep asking when mommy would come home. Ethan had learned to cook, to braid hair for school plays, to smile through exhaustion. He learned that grief didn't fade, it just learned how to sit quietly in the corner while life demanded you keep moving. Losing his job felt like losing the last stable piece of ground beneath his feet. Rent was due in 2 weeks. The car needed repairs. Noah's inhaler refill was already overdue. As he walked out of the building, box of personal belongings shaking in his arms, he felt something crack inside him. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in the quiet way that breaks a person when no one is watching. He sat in his car for a long time, forehead against the steering wheel, tears slipping down without permission. If you were in this situation, what choice would you make? Would you beg? Would you rage? Or would you sit there, stunned, trying to figure out how to explain to a child that the world had changed again? Days passed in a blur of job applications, rejection emails, and polite smiles that hurt his face. Ethan tried to shield Noah from the worst of it, turning it into a game, calling it Dad's vacation. But children feel the truth even when it's hidden. Noah noticed the late-night whispers on the phone, the unopened mail, the way Ethan stared too long at grocery prices. One evening, as they shared a cheap dinner, Noah asked if they were going to lose the house. Ethan excused himself to the bathroom and cried into a towel so his son wouldn't hear. Across town, Richard Coleman couldn't sleep. He told himself had done nothing wrong, that decisions like that were part of leadership. But the image of Ethan standing there, eyes glassy, shoulders slumped, refused to leave him. Richard remembered the way Ethan had always stayed late, never complained, always talked about his son with quiet pride. He remembered the words Ethan hadn't said but had clearly wanted to. I waited outside your door because I had no other door left to stand behind. A week later, Richard did something he'd never done before. He drove past the polished office building and into a modest neighborhood where houses leaned a little closer together, where life was louder and less forgiving. He sat in his car across the street from Ethan's place for a long time, wrestling with a feeling he hadn't let himself feel in years: regret. When Richard finally knocked, Ethan opened the door cautiously, confusion written across his tired face. Noah peeked from behind his father's leg, clutching a toy truck. The moment was awkward, fragile, and painfully human. Richard saw not an employee, but a father barely holding it together. They talked, not like boss and worker, but like two men stripped of titles. Richard admitted he had waited outside Ethan's office door once too, listening, wondering if there was another way. He admitted he had chosen the easier path, the one that protected numbers instead of people. He couldn't undo the firing, not entirely, but he could do something else. Richard had connections, and more importantly, influence. Within days, Ethan was offered a position at a smaller firm, one that valued flexibility and humanity over appearances. The pay wasn't higher, but the hours were kinder. Health insurance kicked in immediately. When Ethan signed the papers, his hands trembled, not from fear this time, but from relief. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. Bills still existed. Grief still visited on quiet nights. But something had shifted. Ethan felt seen. Noah smiled more. The house felt warmer, not because circumstances had magically changed, but because hope had quietly returned. Months later, Ethan passed the old office building on his way to a client meeting. He didn't feel anger anymore, just a strange sense of closure. He realized that sometimes the most painful moments aren't endings, but intersections, places where one person's indifference meets another person's survival. Before this story ends, take a moment and tell us in the comments, if you were Ethan, would you have given up or kept standing outside that door? And if this story truly touched your heart, gently reminding you of kindness, regret, or the power of second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe so more hearts can be reached with stories that matter.